Hello, everyone. My name is Rebecca Morton. My pronouns are she, her. I am the artist and studio manager here at Baltimore Clayworks. We are thrilled that you have joined us. I would like to acknowledge that I am joining from my office located on Piscataway and Susquehannock land, currently known as Baltimore, Maryland. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our virtual artist talk given today by Wayman Scott. He is a 2023 to 24 Embark Fellow. To view more of our virtual content, please visit baltimoreclayworks.org. I will now turn it over to Wayman.
So yes, I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Wayman Scott. My pronouns are he, him. I am presenting from Baltimore, Maryland, here in Washington Hill. And I'm glad to be here. I wanted to talk to you and share a little bit about what my influences are, what they have been, what they are now, and then the direction that my art has gone and my understanding of collectivism as art. So, without further ado, my early influences are hands down, my mother. My mother was just a brilliant pianist. Also, my uncle Sonny, my grandfather uh, Theodore McPherson. They were all amazing pianists. So my some of my earliest memories of the arts is in music. When it comes to visual art, I have always been a huge uh, fan. Right, I've always enjoyed arts and crafts. That was my biggest, most excited uh, field in school. But there were a couple of key early influences regarding that. Early on, like many kids, I was a comic book fan. Stan Lee and Marvel Comics was huge. I remember Wizard magazine. So early on, I started in human figure as a child and as a teenager. I would take these comic book pictures and try to make my own, try to experiment with the body, with the anatomy in terms of how to capture that in 2D. As I continue to develop as an artist, John Nelson was a huge influence that stuck out to me. His work, and you see his work here. As a portrait artist, someone focusing in hyperrealism was just a heavy and huge influence for me. I always admired his fabrics, his folds, his texture. And I remember AP art, he was somebody that I always tried to emulate. And then in college, I started to develop more of my own style. After about a 20-year hiatus, when my mother got sick and was diagnosed with Lou disease, I stepped away from visual art and focused on just the basic needs, school, work, and I did not really take the opportunity at the time to focus on developing as an artist. And it was a few years ago that I got back into the field of art, and it was in two-dimensional art. And when it comes to 2D art, a few of my biggest influences are Benny Bagwell, who is a graduate of the Morgan State University Art Department here in Baltimore City, and Christina Cardova, who is, and they're both brilliant human figure artists. I would say Benny Bagwell is more of an impressionist, and both of them have played just an amazing influence. And then Bill Farrett, who is a very hyper realistic artist, but there was a lot to learn from him the as the Nyberg recipient. I was able to purchase his books and materials and really study his folding technique. And as a student of Iselina Megong Alva, I was able to study and learn essentially from Christina Cordova's big building technique and her flange system. So, two of my biggest influences in terms of teachers are Emily Renee Lamb, and she was able to really expose. She's an absolute master of human figure and form. And she is, brilliant with sculpture, ceramic sculpture, as well as glass sculpture. And I I studied with her for a couple of years, really learning the nuances of human figure and how to transplant that from my 2D learning and understanding into 3D space. And after studying with her, I was able to study with Iselina. I did not take their class, but I was able to do uh, one-on-one study with them where I was able to learn about the big building technique. And Iselina was a student of Christina Cardova. And, you can almost look at the influence and see this line of impact and learning. Whereas Christina developed just a specialized plan system with the big building. So she could build very large pieces, and it might not be practical to build one large or giant piece with ceramic. And you see here on the left, you see Christina, um, her gray hoodie, but this is a huge piece. And even if you were, the Hulk and strong enough to pick up that piece and move it into a kiln, there's not many kilns big enough. And at this stage, the ceramic is very delicate and fragile. And it can easily break. So by putting it into a segmented system and a plan system, it makes something that would not otherwise been attainable now attainable. Now you can build this piece and you can do it in sections, you can fire it in sections, and you can fit it into um, more kilns. You still need a large kiln. However, you can format it in a way where it works. And then you have in the middle here, it's a photo of myself and my teacher Iselina, and they have a very large overlight totem. And you can't tell, but there are very fine seams in this piece, which is built with the plan system. And I said totems, it's not, these are, they describe them as protagonists. And this system, once again, they used this system to build a large piece and they were able to fire it. So this summer, I was grateful to be awarded with the Openshaw Fellowship, and I had a residency at Maryland Hall in Annapolis. It was a great opportunity. I tend to build big, impressionist artists, and I like building life-size sculptures of people. August Rodin is one of my influences. However, when we look at the kiln size, so Clayworks, Baltimore Clayworks has giant gas kiln, giant wood kiln. So I can build an upper body, and I can make that upper body one solid piece, and I can flange, uh, make a flange system to fit it into the lower body. But working at Maryland Hall, they don't have a kiln that big and that size. So I wanted to take what I learned from Iselina with this gravity-fed flange system, and I wanted to uh, do it in a way where I could add the arms separately. I could add the hands separately. So I wanted to experiment with the flange system and then a metal bracket system. So one arm on the Banneker piece had the traditional flange system, and I was able to pop the arm into the uh, arm socket, and it held, and with a strong adhesive epoxy, I was able to keep it there. With the left arm, I decided to make it flush without the flange system. And instead, I used a metal bracing system where plates were adhered toward the upper shoulder and the lower underarm area. And I was able to use another strong epoxy. And I fired them, as you see here, separately. So this is more about this flange bracket system. So on the left side, there was metal braces and brackets. On the right side, the arm had a flange system that actually fit in to these arms. And then I was able to fire it, and I was able to assemble it. And as you see here, you see the finish and the final product. Um, I wanted to go into art as collectivism as art. So, how do you collectivism is really putting the values of the community, the greater, broader community or greater, broader family, sometimes even above your own, because it's this community where you're all connected together. And it, in a way, it goes contrast to individualism, which is a Western concept. But when you go into the African American roots and even the African culture, our history is steeped in the value of collectivism. And I thought, well, how do I uphold that? How do I honor some of my own heritage um, by using collectivism? How do I walk the path of an artist who utilizes use of self? So I asked this question: well, how does my art, how does this art uphold and support some of the values of the community? And in a way, am I giving some form of priority um, or agency to this collectivist work, to the community, to the message? Um, and it can sound counterintuitive for an artist who uses the uh, creative process. It can be both individual, um, but but in the context of your own experience within that community, right? So yes, you're the individual, but as an individual, you are experiencing life and navigating the world in broader community. And that could be in your family, it could be in your school, it could be in your neighborhood, in your faith community. It could be in a multitude of ways. So how do you do that, right? And then stay true to yourself. And that was my question. And I looked at some of the communities that I am a part of and have moved in. And of course, as a Black man in America, part of the African American community. So I can build pieces that can lift and uphold our story. And what that does, it can educate people who are outside of the community about my community. And it can also inspire and motivate people within the community. I'm also part of the Catholic. So, what is that message of the faith community? How can I, in some way, uphold and lift that up in the values that intersect with my own? And here on one side, we have Mother Mary Lang. Mother Mary Lang is, and I'm also Baltimorean, right? So I live in Baltimore, and that's a community as well. And you have Mother Mary Lang. She was the founder of the Oblate Sisters. She founded the first or oldest African American Catholic school in the United States, and one of the oldest Catholic schools, period, in the United States. And she founded the Order of Nuns. She was born in Haiti, she immigrated to the United States. Um, and she did this in the early 1800s when Black people were not even seen as people, right? We didn't have full citizenship. We weren't seen as people with rights. And throughout all of that adversity, all those challenges, this petite, small framed woman from another country, Black woman, was able to create a school, an order of nuns that still is, now they're all around the world today. And they are educating people, and they educate people that are marginalized. So they bring education to communities that otherwise might not have had it. And then the school that she built is still standing. And now there are schools from the Oblate Sisters all around the world. So that was a way to really bring a piece and a story of somebody that hasn't really been heard about outside of the community that she's in, outside of the African American community and outside of the Catholic community. And even within those communities, she's not as well known, although what she did was foundational. And then you look on the right side of the screen, you see Francis Xavier Sealos, the Blessed Francis Xavier Sealos. So both of these people are on track to canonization, which in the Catholic Church means sainthood, meaning they are. It's a special recognition about people's lives, how they impact people, and it's a spiritual significance as well. But Francis Xavier Sealos was someone that catered to the immigrant community. He was part of the Archdiocese of Baltimore at one point. He served here. He was a Redemptorist priest, and he served during the Yellow Fever pandemic. So that's another form of community. Here you have a chaplain who served during a pandemic. So that then looks at the community. Well, who are the healthcare workers? Who are the people that, the community of people that serve um, in healthcare during and were served in chaplaincy during the pandemic. He was in Western Maryland. He ministered to the immigrant German community as well as the African American community, two communities that were marginalized during that time period. And he was so respected and revered. He was offered an opportunity to be ordained a bishop, and he graciously declined that offer because the pandemic was still going on, and he wanted to continue to minister and support people who were sick with yellow fever. And he ended up getting yellow fever himself, and he ended up dying from yellow fever. So he chose to give his life to the people he was serving instead of taking a promotion or a position that some would feel is a high position. So art as collectivism is a way to go into communities and explore stories and break them open and get accessibility to stories and things that people otherwise might not have access to that information. So then we have here an image of Benjamin Banneker uh, working on sculpting his head. This was at Maryland Hall in Annapolis. And the other piece is Frederick Douglass, which I completed here at Baltimore Clayworks during short-term residency. And then you also have the Pieta, which I did to revere and lift up the value of Black lives. And I started this shortly after the death of George Floyd, a few years after the death of the killing of Freddie Gray. And then you see here the hand that says love. This also taps into the Baltimore community. This is based off of a mural that is popular in Baltimore City where the hands spell out the word love. Also, as a ceramicist and as a newer ceramicist, I deal with some trial and error. That is just a part of reality. That is a part of life. But I try to be transparent about my work, my process. I tend to vlog when I'm sculpting. I will often go on to Facebook and I will ask for prayers. Hey, I'm putting this big piece into the kiln. Please pray that it survives the kiln, that it doesn't blow up. And community for me, African American community, the Baltimore metropolitan faith community, also with the Archdiocese linkage. I also want to focus on the neurodivergent community, um, which would allow me to highlight, people and struggles and triumphs, and it's a way to educate and inspire. So, as a newer ceramicist, I've been at this now for about 4 years. You tend to learn how to mend when things break. This is a piece of St. Ignatius that I made for a friend of mine. She is 90, in her early 90s, and she loves St. Ignatius. She mentions him during some of our weekly devotionals. And I made her this piece. Um, I'm new to firing the kiln myself. My colleagues at Clayworks will tell you, yeah, Wayman always, I help Wayman with firing the kiln. But this was one of the first pieces that I fired on my own. And as you see, it didn't work out so well. St. Ignatius' face blew off. But then there's ways to use epoxy and drywall spackle to mend and fix it. And ultimately, the piece ended up looking better than what it would have otherwise looked at. And I just put a cold finish on it. I found myself using this collectivism format and leaning into what would be described as sacred art, meaning faith and spirituality is incorporated into that, my own story, my own lens. So yes, I bring my lens. And there's this question, well, where does your lens intersect with the community that you are engaged or that you are lifting up in your efforts of collectivism as art? And I found myself, most of my publications have been with faith-based newspapers or magazines faith-based. There are some that are not faith-based, but a lot of most of my articles and features have been with that. Um, so you have here, this was a piece I did of Mother Teresa when I was a teenager. It's an example of the 2D work that I do. So even then, I didn't have a concept of sacred art and art as collectivism, but I love to make to capture vivid photographs that I see and find, and I love to draw that. But making images and icons, saints, there's historical significance to that, and cultural significance to this. Here we have Saint Cecilia, the patron saint of music, but once again, it serves as a form of inspiration. And then the final slide, this is not a 2D in traditional sense, but it's graphic design, a piece that I did when we were, a group was doing some work with Exelon. And here you have, it's a logo incorporating the multicolored infinity symbol, which is often used as a symbol for neurodivergence. So, being a portrait artist, I have begun incorporating sculptures of people who are neurodiverse or neurodiverse. That definition means that, um, right now, typically it's defined as somebody that has either autism, spectrum, or they are ADD, ADHD, dysgraphic, or they have dyslexia. So typically one or some of those. And being a member of the neurodivergent community myself, I am the next phase in my art will be incorporating some elements of that community using this format of collectivism as art to highlight and tell the stories. Um, a lot of people don't know that many psychologists today would they would classify Albert Einstein as dyslexic, Benjamin Banneker as autism spectrum, Bill Gates and Richard Branson as ADD or ADHD. So you have these people that have impacted the world in significant and substantial ways, but in a way it's hidden, right? So if you so art is a way to highlight, bring things into the open, and in some way you hope that it can lead to a social change. And with that, thank you so much for your time.